chapter. I believe it's, no, it's the 22nd chapter, I'm sorry. Starting at the 34th verse, Matthew 22:34. This section is called the greatest commandment. You know, when I was growing up, I was in the RAs at the church where I was, Royal Ambassadors. And our mission statement, or our motto was go into all the land preaching the gospel. And it kind of reminded me of this in this particular section right here about the greatest commandment I'm going to speak about. Is kind of follows along with what Ben had spoke about in our Sunday school lesson. He did a real good job with that. And I look forward to doing it next Sunday and just hearing him. It seems like God is really using him. And we appreciate the opportunity him and I both have to come and minister and stand before you and represent the Lord in such a way that will be honored and pleasing to him. Not nothing we do so much as what God does. Now, I want to remind everybody again about the dinner next Sunday at Woodruff Church of God. What we'll do, and I'll talk with Sister Pitts and see what we can, given what we'll do, we'll try to dismiss next Sunday maybe a few minutes early so we can get down there and take our food and join with them, because they certainly support us, and they support this church. There's never a saying here that the church is not full of those folks, and I think it's important for us to support them as well as much as they support us. So keep that in mind. I'm looking forward to it. Anytime I get to eat, I'm happy, you know. So, and especially if somebody else cooks it besides me. Now, I'm a wonderful cook, don't misunderstand me, but I like to sit down and have a meal prepared for me, you know, and it's like anybody else. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to call the preacher and ask him what the menu is. I still want some growling now. Okay, we're going to start with the 22nd chapter of Matthew, the 34th verse. It says, "But when the Pharisees had heard that he had the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. And then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him the question, tempting him, saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law?" He's trying to mess him up. He's trying to trip him up. A Sadducee and a Pharisee, they're all the same people. They're the kind of people, they know everything, and if they don't know it, they will consider making it up. And a lawyer has the worst reputation. I saw it on I was watching television about documentaries, and it said an attorney. More times attorneys are more crooked or more worse than the folks that they're representing. And if you notice what you can do, if you go to your doctor and he treats you, you go in there and you sit up on a little table and they check you blood pressure and pressure, and then he or she examines you and stuff, and that doctor spent a tremendous amount of time in studies learning how to be a doctor, if you will. So that's a pretty noble profession, but what I'm saying is you go in that doctor's office, you get your treatment, and sometimes she'll tell you what's wrong, or he'll tell you what's wrong and what you need to do. And if you don't follow the directions and take the medicine, it's not going to do any good. But the point of the matter about a doctor is that you can go see him, even in the hospital. You can go see him, you can go get treatment, and then when everything's said and done, you render payment. Try to do that with a lawyer. He'll throw you out. They won't talk to you. If they find out, it don't cost nothing to talk. Yes, no, it don't. But bless God, if you use that man, you're going to pay him up front. And that, to me, that's downhill business. I don't like paying for something I hadn't got. But this particular guy was a lawyer, and I imagine he was a pretty big wheel in the place, so they're all listening to him, and he's trying to trip Jesus up, and he says, and says, one of them which was a lawyer asked a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. You know, I like to, and one of these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. It says, love thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind, all thy soul. You know, I wonder, do we really love him? You know, some people want this tangible relationship, and they think love is a physical, intimate relationship. And that can be love. But we're talking about the purest sense of the word, the love of God, and then to return the love of God without some sort of wanting something in return, you know. God loves us unconditionally. But I promise you, if you're a child of God and you're not doing the way you're doing, you're going to have heaping coals on you. And did you know that every bad will that you might think against your neighbor, how is it that if that neighbor come back to you and did the same thing, you know? And right now there's so much hate and so much violence and so much backstabbing and so much stuff going on in the world today. We don't need it in the house of God. We simply don't need it. All we need to do is follow what the scriptures say, thus saith the Lord, and anything past that is us. And usually when you get us involved, that's where we mess up. If we do it as if Jesus comes sitting right down here on the front, I wonder where our thought patterns while the preaching's going on, would it be the same? We'll be thinking about, well, I don't know what he's talking about. I've heard that story. But if Jesus actually came, would it change the way you worship? I think I would. I think first I would be so overwhelmed that Jesus came to hear me or came to our little church. It would just be the greatest thing you've ever seen. But what we seem to don't understand is Jesus is here every day. Every time you come in the door, Jesus is here. Whether you bring him or not, God is everywhere. And, you know, it's a good idea to bring him in the house of worship with you. And if you come into a frame of mind just to worship, just to acknowledge him, just to acknowledge Christ, it's better for us and it's better for the fulfillment of the kingdom. A lot of people they don't care about their neighbor. They don't care about their family. They don't care about nobody but themselves. And I'm guilty of this right here. How to say this? I'm a very loving person. I like to love, and I like to talk love. But I'm also a very, very sinful person. In other words, I'm not perfect. And some of the things I do might not be of God. And I'd like to say I'm in this boat by myself. But you can just as easily jump in there with me having a bad thought. We all have them. It's not the idea of the thought coming to your head, it's if you dwell on it or not. You know, if you let something go in that's bothered you and you don't say nothing, it's like having a splinter. You ever have a splinter in your finger deep enough to where you can't pick it out? You've tried everything, and every time you bump it, you think you're going to die. Until you get that splinter out, until you get it cleaned up, it won't get well. But did you know first, before you can get that splinter out, it has to fester and has to work itself in such a way that the body is rejecting it. And that's the same way that we reject Christ. We say we don't. We say we love Him, but does our life or does our speech and our reflect that we do? Or does it reflect that, you know what, JB, he's a pretty good Christian, but he's just Christian enough to get by. Well, that's crazy. Nobody's Christian enough to get by. You're not going to get by. You're not going to get by. And if you're a child of God, you're going to not want that on you to where it speaks bad of your church family. Now, I'm jealous of my church, and I'm jealous of my church family. You know, we might fight among ourselves, and we might get mad at one another, and we might say, but the bottom line, we're family, and once we're family, we need to be able to work this together. If you cannot resolve an incident, if you got a problem and you still can't resolve it, I would say the problem would be with you. Well, the problem, if it was me, it would be me. Because you know, I'm the kind of guy that I don't get. I'm a happy guy. I'm always looking at the brighter side. But when I get down, I'm really down. And that's just the way the devil likes you. He likes to keep you where he can put his thumb on you and say, you know what? I'm going to turn you loose just long enough to mess up. And that's usually the way it happens. Like an argument with your spouse. I'll use it for me and Stella. When me and Stella are fussing and arguing, I know I should shut up. I know I should just hush. And I know that I'm doing it in such a way that she has to react the way. If not, I'd run slap over her. Now that's crazy, but that's just, I'm sorry, I don't like to be like that. But I do know that, y'all pray for me, that I can get an idle tongue. Because being somebody who's a comedian, who's a funny person or quick-witted, I tend to go for the jugular vein. And it's not a jugular vein incident. It's more of just a prophetic discussion of what's going on in the household. But the bottom line is, if you can't live right in front of your family, you can't live right. Let me rephrase that. If you can live right in front of your family and people that know you, you can do all right. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. But it's because usually we're trying to do it versus letting God do it. And I can't do it, trust me. I mess up every time. And I don't like to be known as a mess up. If somebody tells me, man, that was terrible, you did, man, I don't get that a lot, but when I do get it, it embarrasses me. I like to think that I'm better than that, but in the big scheme of things, I'm not. I'm human, and we all are. But the main thing is that about these two commandments is, let me read them again so you can get the gist. Number 37, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy mind. And he said, that's the first commandment. Love God. He loves us. He sent his son to die for us. He sent his son before I ever came, knowing I was going to come. He knew I was coming. 1954, July 15th, about 2:15 in the morning. God knew that. God knew that. Just like he knows we're going to be in this service today, he knows what it's going to take for this little church. Or let me rephrase it, for this church. Ben has gotten me where I don't like to use adjectives that are negative. Anytime you speak of your church and you say it's little, that's not good. There's nothing little. We're a small congregation, but we serve a great big God. We're part of a great big cause. And to further the kingdom, and there's nothing little about it. Some folks have more, some have less, but I think we're going to have to knock the walls out of this place one day. And we're going to see it where there's just so many folks coming, because there's going to come a time to where people's going to get to where they've got nowhere to turn but God. So you have to have a place ready, because if you got somebody that never has been seeking the Lord, if I didn't know anything about Jesus, and I didn't know anything about God, and I didn't know anything about salvation, and I decided, and I found out, well, you know what? Maybe I am a sinner. The first place I would get lined up with the Bible teaching, Bible believing Christian church. Church that puts God first. And the other commandment is what we all forget, and we're guilty of this, and it says that number 38 and number 39, and the second is likened to it. In other words, this one is just as important as the first one. If you can't love your neighbor who you have seen, how can you love God who you ain't seen? That makes a lot. People say, I love God, but do you? If you love God, you'll show it with your neighbors, you'll show it with your family. They'll see it on you. And it says, and the second commandment is likened to it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Wow. Can people say, I really do that? Now, I've got some good neighbors. That's not talking about the person that's living next door to you. It could be the person living next door to you, but it's mostly talking about people in your life that come, that you somehow interact with. You know, my grandpa that was a preacher, he said this one time. He preached one time about loving everybody. And we went to see this man. My grandpa rabbit hunted, and he had rabbit dogs, so he liked to trade his dogs. So he traded with this one fellow, and he felt like this guy cheated him. So Pa decided he was going to get back with him. He traded him back the same dog that the man said was a good dog. Pa painted him up and sent him back. Well, the fellow got mad because Pa put shoe polish on the dog to change his color. You know, the man got mad at my grandpa. So Grandpa, he's fussing, and then he got in the car and he said, I can't stand brother so-and-so. And I asked him, I said, Pa, I said, I heard you say this morning at church that you're supposed to love everybody. And I'll never forget what my grandfather told me. He looked at me, he said, son, some people's hard to love. And they are. That don't give an excuse. Okay, if I love you and you don't accept it, or I pray for you, or I care for you and you don't accept it, has nothing to do with it. I did my part. Where someone's receptive to you, everybody ain't gonna like you. Everybody ain't. That's why some folks like collard greens and some folks like pinto beans. It's just everybody has got a different. And what God created is all different, all unique. But He created us in mind of worshiping Him. That was the whole deal, that He get glory. Well, I'm going to close now, and I just want to say that think about what the Scripture says. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. And don't do it half-heartedly. Look at, if it's like I told y'all earlier, God's house ought to be the nicest place in the neighborhood. Now, that don't mean you got to have chandeliers hanging down. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm saying God's house ought to be as such as a place where you walk in the door, you do immediate reverence. You step in the door and all things change. Everything outside is non-existent anymore. Except you come inside the doors of the church, and everything should be about God and about God's business, not about what brother said, not what I said, not what nobody else said. It's about thus saith the Lord. And if we keep that in our church, and we keep preaching and teaching it in our church, it's going to flow out with us. But every time you come to church, remember, it's not just a building with block and windows and lights and maybe some music. It's a place where you can have an intimate relationship with God the Father through Jesus Christ. When Christ went to the cross, he made an avenue for us to gain heaven. Had Christ not went to the cross, had he not been crucified, had he not rose on the third day, we would have no hope. But we have wonderful, wonderful, wonderful hope. Now, I don't know how to be exactly right now when you pass away. I don't know. The body says absent from the Lord, absent from the body, is to be present with the Lord. I guess any time that you're hanging around with God, it's got to be such a wonderful, euphoric feeling. But the family that lost a loved one, a lot of folks forget it's really not about the person that passed away. It's about the folks that are left. Because there's going to be a void there in the family. That person's going to miss that person. And they're going to think about them a lot. So anything we can do to build up encouragement and build up strength and encourage the family or anybody else, it's going to be what God would have us to do. Would everybody stand, please? Sister Shirley, would you dismiss in prayer?
Father, Lord, to come to you, Lord, this morning, Lord, we thank you, Lord, for the word, Lord. Father, Lord, we thank you, Lord, for what you've done for us, Lord. And Father, as we leave this